Salams, you're watching the Daily Roundup, People's Dispatch's selection of some of the top stories from around the world. Let's first take a look at today's headlines. The Sudanese opposition has rejected the military regime's democracy offer. Protests continue in Panama against high prices and economic decline. Ukraine has banned the country's Communist Party and seized all its assets and funds. And in the UK, the government has been hit by another scandal as ministers resign en masse. First up, Sudan's main civilian political bloc, the Forces for Freedom and Change, has dismissed a proposal by the country's military ruler to facilitate the formation of a transitional civilian government. The FFC on Tuesday, the 5th of July, termed the offer by Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan a tactical retreat and a transparent maneuver and called on the Sudanese people to continue intensified, sustained protests against the post-coup regime. FFC's leader, Taha Othman, in a statement said that the Army Chief's speech was a giant ruse, even worse than the 25th October coup of last year. He added that the country's political crisis will only end with the resignation of the coup leaders and the formation of a civilian government by the revolution. The military regime had overthrown last year the transitional civilian government, which was formed to return the country to democratic rule after the ousting of former leader Omar al-Bashir. Massive popular protests erupted nationwide soon after against the coup and the military regime, continuing to this day. In the ensuing government crackdown on protests since then, close to 100 protesters have been killed and thousands others injured. Protests held yesterday in the capital Khartoum, even during the army chief's speech regarding his proposal, were brutally suppressed, with tear gas, stun grenades, and other solid objects being used to target protesters. This is according to the Sudan Doctors Committee. The international community has also tried to mediate and broker talks between the regime and the opposition groups, but the FFC has refused to participate in these talks as long as the military continues to participate. Al-Burhan also announced yesterday that the military regime will no longer take part in the talks facilitated by the United Nations, the African Union, and IGAD, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development. Meanwhile, the Sudanese economy continues to rapidly decline under international sanctions and because of political instability and unrest. Ordinary Sudanese people are suffering the most in what is one of the world's poorest countries. The people of Panama continue protests against the high cost of living and to demand government action to resolve the growing economic crisis. The protest began on the 1st of July to mark 3 years since the beginning of the government of right-wing President Laurentino Cortizo. Since then, workers, fisherfolk, students, educators, and civilians have braved heavy police repression, staging blockades of key roads and marching in major cities to make their demands heard. The mobilizations are organized by social movements and trade unions from across diverse sectors of Panamanian society that came together in the People United for Life Alliance, including the National Front for the Defense of Economic and Social Rights and the Single Union of Construction Workers. During a meeting in May, the alliance created a list of 32 demands, I quote, in light of the grave economic, political, and social situation that the country is suffering under and the lack of response and attention of the authorities, end quote. The demands include freezing the price of fuel and basic commodities, a general increase in salaries and pensions, freezing the price of medicine and resolving the lack of supply of medicines, measures to combat corruption, repairs to schools, roads, and public infrastructure, and rejecting the 4 bilateral US-Panama military bases, as well as policies to support indigenous communities and ensure the respect of their autonomy, among other demands. In their letter to the national government, they highlighted that in response to the crisis that was made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic, there is consensus among international bodies such as the ILO and the United Nations that governments should take measures that protect the rights of people and broaden the social safety net for the most vulnerable. However, they state, Panama has taken the opposite approach and has continued to be oriented towards the recovery only of the rate of profit and the protection of capital. The alliance has attempted to raise the list of demands to the national government on several occasions, but had summarily been told that the government could not address any of these demands. The closure of doors to dialogue led to the alliance's call for mobilizations beginning this month. A court in Ukraine has permanently banned the country's Communist Party, seized all of its assets, including party buildings and funds. The 8th Administrative Appeal Court in the city of Lvov on the 5th of July outlawed the party, saying it was satisfied by the claims of the Ministry of Justice against the party. In a statement, it ordered that all property, assets, funds of the Communist Party of Ukraine, called the KPU, from its regional, city as well as district organizations, as well as primary centers and structural entities, be transferred to the state and all of its activities prohibited. Reports indicate that Ukrainian authorities have been trying to ban the party for more than 7 years with the help of decommunization laws which banned communist symbols to prevent party activities, barring it from participating in elections and shutting down its official newspaper. In the last general election in which the KPU was allowed to participate back in 2012, it received 2.6 million votes. That's 13% of the overall votes cast. Notably, no right-wing, far-right or neo-Nazi organizations have been banned or targeted by the government in a similar manner, despite evidence of them being involved in human rights violations and war crimes in Ukraine. Other leftist and left-leaning opposition parties have also been banned by the government, including the For Life Party, Left Opposition, Union of Left Forces, the Socialist Party of Ukraine, and some others. They were banned after the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky in May this year banned all parties which were deemed pro-Russian. Communist leaders and workers are also facing persecution, with the government currently continuing the trial for two communist youth leaders on allegations of spying for Russia and Belarus. Alexander and Mikhail Kononovich, who are brothers, were arrested on March the 3rd on charges of trying to overthrow the government and political system of Ukraine as part of an organized group and face life in prison on these charges. While their trial is ongoing, the brothers have appealed to the European Parliament, news outlets and leftist organizations across Europe to attend their show trial to witness in person the mockery of justice being made and the true face of the Ukrainian regime. The brothers haven't been allowed to have access to their lawyer at their trial hearings, nor have they been allowed to speak to a lawyer regarding their case, and have called the case completely fabricated from start to finish. And finally, in a developing story, the United Kingdom government is in a massive crisis over a scandal involving sexual misconduct allegations against a senior member of its government. The latest crisis to hit the government, led by Prime Minister Boris Johnson, has resulted in a number of ministers resigning from their positions. At last count so far, 16 ministers have resigned in the past day, including some of the most important positions such as the UK Chancellor to the Exchequer Rishi Sunak and Health Secretary Sajid Javid. Other ministers to resign include Education Ministers Will Quince and Robin Walker, Justice Minister Victoria Atkins, Treasury Minister John Glenn, as well as ministerial aides Laura Trott and Felicity Buchan. Several key ministers continue to back the Prime Minister, including Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, Home Secretary Preeti Patel, and Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab. The scandal at the centre of these resignations involves the Prime Minister's appointment of Chris Pincher as a Minister and Deputy Chief Whip, despite being aware of the sexual misconduct allegations against him. The Prime Minister has since admitted that it was a mistake to appoint Pincher to these posts, and he has said sorry. But in the last few weeks, the government has regularly changed its response and given conflicting statements as to whether the Prime Minister was aware or not of the allegations long before deciding on the appointment. Until recently, the government had to face widespread anger and criticism over a scandal over parties attended by the Prime Minister and other government officials in clear violation of lockdown restrictions at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Johnson himself has been fined by the police and has survived narrowly a no-confidence motion in Parliament by a slim margin. That's all we have on this episode of the Daily Roundup. For more details on all of these stories, you can head over to our website, peoplesdispatch.org, and give us a follow on the social media platform of your choice. We'll be back again tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.